Hello world, how y'all doing? This is Chris Camelio coming at you again with another episode of This Week in PT School I Learned. This episode is brought to you by people that you wave to accidentally who still wave back. So thank you. We'll get right to it. This week in PT School I learned that if I don't set aside time to do something, I probably won't actually do it. This week in PT School I learned that if you get a numbness or a tingling sensation in your extremities, but you're able to shake it out right away, that would most likely be indicative of a vascular paresthesia or an altered sensation due to blood flow or lack thereof. Whereas if you had numbness or tingling in your extremities and you weren't able to shake it out right away, and it might kind of stay there for a few minutes, it might kind of come back later on the rest of the day, that is more likely indicative, that latter example is more likely indicative of a nerve issue. I also learned that both tendons and ligaments are still vascular tissues. They're just relatively avascular when compared with our bones and our muscle tissue. So they're relatively avascular. They might take a little bit longer to heal versus a pull of some muscle fibers or versus like a bone bruise. But they're still very vascular, and that's how they're able to repair themselves. That's how they're able to function. That's how they're able to mature. So, for example, with an ulnar collateral ligament reconstructive surgery or a Tommy John surgery, basically your ulnar collateral ligament is what attaches your ulna, your medial bone of your forearm, to your humerus, the main bone of your upper arm. An ulnar collateral ligament repair would at first become weaker the first maybe 6 to 8 weeks after that surgery has gone down, because the ligaments haven't quite been vascularized in these new areas. Usually it's actually part of a tendon graft that they'll attach there, maybe from a cadaver or maybe from another part, maybe the palmaris longus muscle, which is apparently vestigial. We can do without it, so they'll take either that tendon or a tendon from somewhere else that's strong enough. And initially it'll be kind of strong, but then these first 6 to 8 weeks it won't be quite as vascular. It won't get that same vascular supply that it's used to, and so it'll get weaker. And then after about 6 to 8 weeks is when it starts to get stronger, because those vascular networks are starting to be rebuilt. I also learned that certain types of muscle hypertrophy could actually be deleterious to your nerves. So if you hypertrophied your scalenes, for example, which your anterior and middle scalenes basically make up the border of your thoracic outlet, which is where your brachial plexus, the nerves that make up your brachial plexus, will run through. So if you kind of hypertrophy, for example, the scalenes, you could start to close off that space. Those nerves could get compressed and damaged if we have a lot of scalene hypertrophy. As well, a pronator teres hypertrophy, so your pronator teres, it attaches from your medial epicondyle of the humerus, as well as the coronoid process of the ulna, and it attaches on the lateral part of the radius, the bone of the lateral aspect of your forearm. If we had pronator teres hypertrophy, your pronator teres is basically pronation, it'll turn your palm that way. So if I hypertrophy this muscle, because my median nerve runs in between each of these heads of the pronator teres, if I hypertrophy the pronator teres, I could be compressing that median nerve and cause some issues there as well. So those are a few things I learned this week in PT school that I feel could be very important at some point to remember throughout my career. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to what I learned next week. Have a great one.